This issue of securing CAMCA'S digital future, and the subtitle of that panel is, of course, in an era of US PRC Geo-tech rivalry. But that is a kind of an oversimplification, I think, of the highly contested and fraught international technology environment that all of our countries are headed into. It's true that the United States and the People's Republic of China have been enmeshed in a deepening competition for market share, for dominance of the key industries and technologies of the future, but also a contest fundamentally over governing norms around the world, a contest over whether human beings will continue in the 21st century to exercise governance over themselves through rule of law, or whether, in fact, and I put this somewhat starkly when you look at Chinese smart cities, whether, in fact, human beings will increasingly come to be governed by algorithm and the surveillance state. But geotechnology, of course, is a many-faceted and highly complex set of issues that brings together the struggle for power and position that is unfolding across Eurasia, and also highly technical issues for which I have little expertise to speak about today. But fortunately, we have three folks here who have an enormous amount of, as I said, insight into what's unfolding in the CAMCA region. And so I wanted to just briefly mention that Dr. Khatuna, Rakhim, and Sarkhan are all going to speak to us today for roughly about 8 or 10 minutes with some remarks that they've prepared. Sarkhan, I should add, is filling in for our own Steve Cambone, who, alas, was not able to make this trip because of some travel difficulties, but Sarkhan is here and has a wealth of expertise from Baku. And so with that, I wanted to begin with Khatuna from the George Washington University.
Okay, I'm just going to introduce briefly a little bit about myself, what I do here. I teach cybersecurity at George Washington University, and I also teach at Champlain College. I taught before in various other universities, including Utica College. In particular, I teach cyber operations, cyber forensics, cyber intelligence, mostly the technical kind of courses. Now, let me just speak about the CAMCA region, and why CAMCA region is so important for the major regional players, and in particular for China. You all know the Belt Road Initiative project, and this is a huge project, and the massive part of this project in 2015, actually the Digital Silk Road was added to the Belt Road Initiative project, because China just realized that you have to really be a dominant country in terms of technology. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to actually rule the world. And Xi himself, a couple of years ago, made a statement that in 2025, they plan that they want China to become a leading country in terms of the advanced manufacturing, meaning, for example, using the innovative technology to create the existing one and also to create the new one. So the second one is at 2035, we want to have a leading position in terms of setting standards of the technology standards. And they are teaming up with Russia in this respect, as well as the Central Asian countries that support this initiative. They want to kind of move the internal governance from the multi-stakeholder kind of approach to the ITU. You know, they have more control in the ITU, and that's why actually they want to accomplish this. They tried it a couple of times in the UNGA, but unfortunately they haven't, unfortunately for us, but unfortunately for them, they haven't been able to actually achieve this, this mission. And by 2050, they want to become the superpower. So what actually Digital Silk Road is? Because we know that those who have upper hands in a technology field, whether it is a quantum computing or artificial intelligence, you know, you're going to be the ruler of the world, because the world is changing. It's kind of we're moving from the kind of a traditional system to a very tech-oriented system. And you know, I mean, this technological development actually happened in 10 years. Everything changed. Every single field became digitalized. So what does it mean? What does it actually cover? They want to, it covers not only, for example, 5G, but it covers also fiber optic cables, as well as, quantum computing, creating the blockchain service network. And they actually launched the blockchain service network just a couple of years ago. And they want it to be deployed worldwide. So, what is the blockchain? Just to kind of explain what does it mean, the blockchain service network. It's actually platform, basically the technical platform for the that provides ledger for the blockchain applications. And they are doing lots of things. They are putting lots of resources, lots of financial resources. They are pushing their companies like Huawei, as well as some other, major corporation, tech corporation, actually to invest in the digital field, not only inside the country, but also outside the country. And they are exporting their technologies. They are exporting their surveillance technology, AI-based enabled surveillance technology. They are helping countries in the region to build up the smart cities. And they're putting lots of resources. In some regions, for example, in Uzbekistan in 2019, while they closed the $1 billion deal for the, for the build-up of the kind of very modern traffic monitoring system, basically the surveillance system. Hikvision, one of the also very kind of leading Chinese company in terms of the manufacturing, video-based surveillance system. So Kazakhstan, across the countries, supplied by this technology, as well as, for example, in 2019, they helped Kyrgyzstan to open the police command center, and they supplied them with Chinese surveillance equipment. So what is actually Chinese? And they have a very smart kind of approach. They go to the countries, they give them the loans, and it's kind of a concessional loans. It comes with a conditionality, and they ask, we're going to give you a loan, but no, with 50% of our equipment, our materials, our company's role in those projects, whether it is a digital project or it is some kind of other type of the project, will be Chinese. So they understand that they need to export lots of technology. By the way, we had some kind of and there is some other players in the region, for example, Russia. Russia, kind of in a competition with Russia's Eurasian Union, with the BRI, Belt Road Initiative project, and in particular also the Digital Silk Road is one of the major parts of this, as I mentioned. And but it's interesting that there are two kinds of revisionist power, but in 2015 they signed the agreement, cooperation agreement, basically kind of to diminish the rivalries between those two powers, and they agreed that okay, we can cooperate, we can have a joint ventures. For example, AliExpress has a joint venture with the MTS and other Russian telecommunication companies that have the heavy presence in Central Asia. And they are actually cooperating in this respect a lot. And not only, by the way, just recently, Beidou, as well as the Galileo, this kind of rivalry to GPS and not Galileo, I'm sorry, GLONASS, and Galileo is European system, kind of they are teaming up in this respect to have an integrated system and to counter GPS and to counter Galileo. They are having lots of cooperation in many areas, and I'm not gonna talk about this in a military field, in a trade field, in economic field in general, and in technology things as well. They formed a cybersecurity forum in 2015. And they are cooperating in many, many areas, even in quantum computing, in artificial intelligence. In 5G, for example, one of the major issues, I mean, the Chinese major goal is to kind of equip the telecommunication networks all over the world, not only in BRI, but apart from, they want to dominate the world with their technology. But they kind of, there is a, of course, the United States, for example, the UK's case is very important in this respect, and the United States actually asked or diplomatically, forced the UK to reject this deal with the Huawei in terms of the 5G technology, and it was banned. And by 2027, they're gonna remove all the 5G kits from the UK's telecommunication network. Also about Russia. It's not only the surveillance system that they are importing their surveillance technology in the CAMCA region. I mean, Russia's surveillance system, for example, the SORM system. SORM is a system of operative investigative measures. Basically, this is a software-based, kind of surveillance system. All the data goes for this system, and the system is connected via kind of so-called black boxes to the intelligence organizations. If I miss something, we can have in the Q&A section, so I can answer questions as well. In South Caucasus, by the way, in Azerbaijan, they have interest. Azerbaijan, I think that's in 2020, China became the biggest trading partner in by export, if I'm not mistaken, and they just signed over $800 million. Economic package. It's non-energy sector. It actually will be mostly concentrated on digital Silk Road and that sort of thing. So they are cooperating in many, for example, the Chinese are helping in smart cities and to build the smart cities in Azerbaijan as well, according to the new research. They also want to build it, for example, in Armenia as well, in cooperation with Viva MTS. So in this respect, they are putting, but in Georgia, for example, they wanted actually to employ to actually build up the 5G technology in Georgia, but because of the memorandum agreement with the United States, actually United States, because of this agreement, this kind of agreement challenged 5G mission or Chinese CAS to, install all the 5G kits on Georgian telecommunication networks. They are putting lots of efforts, lots of financial resources, and this kind of a concessional loans and these kind of conditions that they have, I mean, they just don't care about the issues like human rights, freedom of speech, and that sort of thing. When the Western investor comes, of course, they first of all just look about the situation in the country, corruption, how the level of the democracy, etc., etc. For Chinese, that's not the issue. They also use very, what is also very important, is kind of a soft power. They have established dozens of Confucius institutes in all of those areas. For example, in Azerbaijan, the Chinese kind of put the seed for the new, future projects, and what it actually includes, that's it kind of, they're financing this exchange program to train the young Azeris in the field of electronic engineering as well as cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, in that sort of things. So the same approach we have in Georgia as well. So yeah, I mean, their mission is pretty clear. They are pushing their companies to implement this digital Silk Road initiative, and because they understand that that the technological dominance is actually very, very important to make BRI overall, the Belt Road Initiative, or all this project successful in the future.
Terrific way to start things off. As Mao Zedong had said, political power grows from the barrel of the gun, and I think today's Chinese Communist Party still believes that, but they also understand, as Khatuna had said, that power, political power, including power over other countries, flows from artificial intelligence and dominance of telecommunications network and technological dependency on China. Technology, I mean, this sets the context of this discussion quite well. Technology, even more so than territory, is a central focus of geopolitical competition and rivalry in our era. And if China can control other people's data and it develops dependencies on Chinese firms, it will have a tremendous amount of ability to manipulate other countries in ways that may very well be against those other countries' interests. We can get into the U.S. perspective on this in a bit, but I wanted to hear from Rakhim next, who I've spoken a bit with this in Kazakhstan with you and some of your colleagues, but curious your thoughts.
Okay, let me be a little bit controversial. So I'm quite skeptical about how big is the interest of China into the CAMCA region, at least into Central Asia. So if we will follow the figures of the investments, of the trade, so on and so forth, so we see this Chinese isolationism, and One Belt, One Road still is under the criticism because it's not concretely shaped. It's just kind of the ideology paradigm or something like this, and all investment projects, all digital projects we can name like this is the part of the One Belt, One Road, but actually it's just an business as usual, I think. And talking about digital future, first of all, we should say that we are observing this big kind of decoupling, taking into account this war in Ukraine and sanctions, and these are absolutely unpredicted consequences for the world trade, economy, so on and so forth. But what we see that at least Russia and maybe China decided completely withdraw themselves from this Western type of the globalization.
Yeah.
And the digitalization, digital platforms plays extremely important role in this. And we see that the China was able to build quite independent, isolated, self-sufficient digital environment, digital ecosystems. And Russia started later, was not succeeded like China, but I think this is the matter of time. And and the topic of our discussion, US-China Geo-tech rivalry, so I suggest also to put Russia, because our countries is neighboring with Russia, and lots of digital platforms is from Russia, and they successfully competing with the US or even with Chinese digital platforms. Another point, so that our country could definitely benefit a lot from digitalization because of we are in a very low position, low level of the digitalization, and the gap is so high. So if we just follow some fundamentals in digitalization, we can benefit. Of course, countries obviously is too small in terms of the market size, in terms of the number of consumers. We can't afford ourselves to build independent platforms, and this is inevitably we will join in our platforms. But on the other hand, countries are not under the exclusive influence of the big countries. And we have economic relations both with China, with US and Russia, and therefore we can use the platforms of all parties which are mutually exclusive in their homeland. And, for example, in Kazakhstan, in Kyrgyzstan, so we're enjoying also Facebook and TikTok, and enjoying some of them of Kontakte, and it's okay. But in addition, so countries in the current situation also have, at the moment, excellent position to attract intellectual capital, especially from Russia, from Belarus, from Ukraine. And we see this influx of the IT specialists in Uzbekistan, in Kyrgyzstan, Georgia, Armenia, so on and so forth. And and that we can create self-sufficient regional products. So we have lots of examples. For example, Freedom Finance company. So Timur Turlov, he's a friend of mine. He came to Kazakhstan from Russia in 2012, and last week he received Kazakhstani citizenship and withdrew himself completely from Russia. He now has turnover like $3 billion US, and he announced quite amazing digital products, fintech, like car lending, digital car loans. Oh, wow. So within 3 hours you can get decision. So you put just your name, your tax number, and the plate number, and they connect without any participation of the employees. Just take the information from different database, and so within 3 hours you will get the decision, and the new number, so you can choose the number, so pay, so on and so forth. And it's really could be one of the most advanced fintech product in the world in this area. So, and this is an example that our CAMCA region can benefit from our small size and
play a global role.
Yeah, global, and so that we are not taking part of the US, China, Russia, so on. In other points, so also I think many observers, especially who is investing into cryptocurrencies, noticed that May 25, the Binance CEO, Jinping Zhao, visited Kazakhstan and met the president. They signed the memorandum of understanding, and it's a big deal for Kazakhstan. So they announced that Binance will take responsibility, overall responsibility for all crypto assets environment in Kazakhstan, will consult, advise the country on the development of a legislative framework and the policy for regulating crypto assets. And what is important, they announced, and the Ministry of Digitalization announced, that Binance and Kazakhstan will also jointly look for opportunities to integrate banking infrastructure into cryptocurrency market. And also they create capacity for developing like a blockchain-focused venture capital fund. And I think also we see this, that China, it's not politically motivated, politically driven for sure decision. It was just interest of this world-leading crypto exchange. They interest to find the location, the jurisdiction, which will be welcome them, and which is can be okay working with Russia, with China, and US. As far as I understand, because I can't check my account on Binance, it's blocked. And in our example, which illustrates the current situation, Didi, which is the one of the biggest Chinese taxi service, after more than 1 year of try into Kazakhstani or Russian market, so decided to leave because they can't compete with the Yandex, with InDriver, which is the also quite big Russian companies, and they're quite effective. So, and it draws a picture quite mosaic, and I'm in this kind more optimistic because it's great future. And the Big Five, also Big Five, working in Central Asia, Facebook, Amazon, Google, Meta, so they decided completely to leave Russia, but they're still working in CAMCA region. I think that now the cloud the sales declining because of the overall economic situation. But especially after pandemic, so we see the growth, world growth of the cloud consumption more than 20%. It's amazing.
Is that right?
It's now less than $500 billion US, the market estimated in 2022, and for 2023, so the estimate is more than 600 billion. So it's a big deal, and cloud. I think Sarkhan will tell us the cloud about much more. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll come back to that. I want to I do want to ask all of you your thoughts on what the optimal strategies and policies might be for CAMCA countries to preserve the autonomy, the freedom that you have to shape your own digital futures, to accelerate digitization, as we've discussed, while also ensuring that your data doesn't come to be, or your technological futures don't come to be dominated by some external power. So we'll come back to that. Sarkhan.
I will start with the last question, actually. I mean,
Great.
in terms of how to build the autonomous freedom, I mean, it's like army, you should continuously invest. This is what tech is about these days. And I will start how I actually ended up as a panelist today. I was working, trying to help my colleagues, I mean, to position Azerbaijani wine, which is quite new to this region, and then you came with a brilliant proposal that there is a job for you, which is for free, but this is somehow to position yourself, and I accepted. This is actually IT market these days. You are getting the offer immediately in a couple of hours, and either you accept it or you are declining, and then all these guys, I mean, will jump to other markets. Unfortunately, what we see today, American companies, I don't know why, but they are started to be less flexible as they used to be in the previous days. While the China, especially I will touch the topic of US-China, while the Chinese companies, for them it doesn't matter. I mean, if small country, big country, money, for them money is the same money. I would agree actually with Rakhim that I don't feel that China is going aggressively toward our markets, but every time when there is a request to sell something, they do it brilliantly. While American companies, I mean, they are taking the opportunity, they are doing a lot of compliance checks, I need to understand here, etc., etc., etc. At the end of the day, the lead time by one of the very well-known world company, Cisco, for our kind of market, it takes 350 days. You need a server, 350 days, especially if you are ordering this for the government office. Minister of Finance, they work only for 12 months. If you order in January, 350 days, it means that you are not getting the servers this fiscal year, it's for the next one. It means you are also losing the budget. Same if with the Chinese technologies, 3 months delivered, and it's already in your office, and it works already. So this is how actually the American companies are losing using the compliance, etc. Maybe this is for them, it's really maybe the priority, but they are losing the market. Maybe today they don't feel it because they're very well equipped, let's say the baseline of the US technologies from the previous years. But ongoing, I feel that Chinese and Indian companies, I mean the Asian companies will take over more from the market share of the US companies. But also, we remember that recently still in some countries we are living in pandemic world. There was a huge escalation of how to use technologies, and in some cases they were not even reachable. So what we did, I mean, almost everyone moved to cloud. Especially flexible those days was the education offices. Ministry of Education, universities, I mean, they started to be enabling in their daily life, I mean, the technologies from the cloud. If previous years before the pandemic, if you would go for the Ministry of Education in any of CAMCA countries, they would maybe except Georgia because they are more open these days, but other countries, I mean, they were thinking, no, our data will be outside of the country, etc., etc. These days they don't think about this. Azerbaijan received a lot of certificates being a leader these days in terms of consumption of cloud in education. Everyone is using Office 365 from Microsoft. Microsoft is happy, I mean, the schools are happy, etc. But what's happening now, after pandemic, some decline is also there, but in general, I mean, those hybrid life will be staying there, it's not leaving. And this pandemic situation is leading to also to decision makers from the other government units as well, because especially government offices was suspicious if my data should be stored outside of the country or not. Also back to the topic of how I am building the autonomous freedom. It will be hybrid. Both locally, servers will be equipped, and also the cloud technology will be used. Cloud technology will be used with the encryptions, etc. And especially for those data which you need a lot of cloud computing, cloud power, which you will analyze outside. You will bring the results, and you will use inside of the country. This is how it will, I believe, how it will work. But in terms of cloud, I believe US technologies is more secure. Azure, Amazon, they are much more in comfort position versus to Alibaba, especially in Caucasus countries. In Central Asian countries, there was some efforts, I would say, starting from Alibaba, but it didn't end up with the success. But in terms of, let's say, the server-based, as I said, I mean, last 2 days I've spent in Las Vegas with Cisco. These guys, I mean, are far from the understanding of what's happening in the realities, that they are losing the markets, and it's not only happening with the Cisco. The other US technology companies, I mean, supplying with the servers, I mean, what they say that we are facing is the issues with the microchips. Fine. That it doesn't mean that the countries that are in use, are in need of those technologies, will wait until you guys are solving your problems. I mean, and for them is the priority markets is big markets like Germany, other Western countries. But as I said, I mean, for Chinese it doesn't matter. Big market, small market, money for them is the same money. I mean, the dollar is the same dollar. As for the surveillance, yes, here Hikvision is dominating. But what they do, they just provide the chip technology. Still, the data is kept in the country.
Low cost,
yeah, so I don't believe there is a huge issue for the cybersecurity. But where is the issue, and why the American companies are, let's say, now leading in all our countries? Because many years ago they started with the universities. They started with the university certification programs for the students, etc. And this is today we have the comfort for the American companies because of that period, because a lot of generation have grown up with this knowledge, and they go to the work and they demand these American technologies. They are not active anymore with the universities, and this is, I believe, this is the gap is happening, while the Chinese companies started to be active in this field. They started to work with the education, they started to work with the knowledge transfer. They are doing a lot of grand products, I mean, the computer, etc., etc. If you ask me, still it's the same American technology, but it's coming to the countries through the Chinese government, fine. What else they do, especially in Central Asia, I mean, they are giving the technologies, and you can start to pay after 30 years, after 20 years, but you owe them. So this is in advance, I mean, for next 20, 30 years, I mean, they are taking you that you owe them, and one day you will need to pay for all these technologies that are using today with comfort. I'm not sure if it's leading for the autonomous freedom. So there is a balance should be kept in terms of what I use now and what I should be also using in the future. So cybersecurity threats, it's a lot coming from all these countries. Cybersecurity, let's say bad cops are registered a lot, especially in the case of Azerbaijan from Iran. But the cloud technologies, especially, I mean, if you are doing some umbrella around your if you would like to build, let's say, the resilient government, I mean, that should be used of the technologies from the, again, very well-known cybersecurity companies. If enough resources in the country to stop all these attacks, not enough. And that's why maybe the small countries, I mean, should tie up with each other, like, I don't know, the cooperation with Israel, and their experience, I mean, how they are dealing with this. I mean, this is, and the small countries here need to cooperate with each other more, once again, yeah, to build up some realistic scenarios, because, I mean, most of the big companies are coming from the big countries. I mean, they are telling about the different scenarios, which are not necessarily applicable for those small countries. So this is the top of mind.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Yeah, Sarkhan, because Sarkhan is a big specialist in the region on cloud-based, former country, Microsoft country. manager. So the question is about cloud business model. No doubt that this is the main driver of the digital transformation, but don't you think that how we rely on the cloud after what was happened in Russia when the Microsoft and, for example, Salesforce, they just blocked their clients in Russia, so they lost all their databases, clients, and it creates the case that the cloud could be, the access to the cloud could be politically motivated. And for example, we can imagine that some persons or companies in Azerbaijan, in Georgia, or in Kazakhstan, in Kyrgyzstan could be under sanctions. And after that, immediately, so your company will lose access. And this is the core of the business model. And it will also negative attitude towards cloud.
Definitely there is a reputational damage. Whatever they write on the agreement, it didn't work. The law protects us now. In this case, in this kind of scenarios, we saw that it doesn't work. So whatever is critical infrastructure for the government, I am firmly believer that it should be kept within the country. But those data that you can really use outside of the country or analyze them, and for example, they will not damage your daily work of your government, this kind of stuff, I mean, could be kept and used in the cloud. This is what I believe.
This is a wake-up call for, I think, a lot of Americans who are thinking about the technological dimension of the U.S.-China rivalry, because, you know, after Xi Jinping had announced the continental component of the Belt and Road Initiative formally in Nur-Sultan, a month later he announced the maritime component of it in Indonesia. Americans scrambled to try to understand what this was. Was it a massive development scheme, as a lot of theorists in China had called it, or was it in fact a geopolitical gambit to basically give Eurasia a new operating system, a China-dominated operating system in which China had privileged access and privileged ability to make that operating system run on Chinese software, Chinese hardware. Anyway, when Americans began to understand this and think about it, we naturally concluded, I think very early on, that it would be very difficult for American firms to out-China China when it came to infrastructure development, for example, building roads and airports and stuff like that. Why? Because the Chinese government can just marshal enormous sums of money to build these kinds of projects and then send large, massive labor groups and companies that bring Chinese labor in to build this kind of infrastructure. So the United States can't out-China China when it comes to dumb infrastructure, but there was always this sense in the US that, well, we can compete with China in terms of providing healthcare alternatives, in terms of providing educational alternatives, in terms of providing technological alternatives, among other things. But one of the things, Sarkhan, that you had said, and what both Khatuna and Rakhim had also suggested, is that China is all over this market, and in significant ways, and has acquired a lot of competitive advantages that, frankly, European firms and American firms and the American government, I think, are still several steps behind in a lot of areas. That's my view. Curious, number one, if you agree with that. You certainly seem to suggest that. But also to Khatuna and everybody else on the panel, where is this headed? Where is this headed as China does attempt to establish its dominance? I believe that is its goal. It might not be, China's involvements in CAMCA might not be driven by a desire to dominate merely the markets. It might not be market access in CAMCA that is China's primary goal. But it's quite clear that China is trying to spread its standards, its governing standards, its technological standards, its way of thinking about the world in the region. Where do you see this going? And what kinds of challenges does it pose to the sovereignty of and the future of CAMCA countries, as well as the economic competitiveness and the technological innovation agenda of CAMCA countries? Khatuna.
Chinese, they just think in a very long term. So when we speak about, you mentioned that, so we don't see a lot of investment. What I saw that they're really putting lots of resources and billions of dollars in different and of course the surveillance technology is one of the major sections in this respect. They are also creating their own forums. For example, the World Internet Conference, they added the sub-forum of the Digital Silk Road to the Belt Road Initiative Forum just a couple of years ago. And also you mentioned that India also is playing a big role, but India, by the way, joined with Japan as well as the United States and European Union to form the cooperation actually to counter Digital Silk Road. I think that's a major kind of achievement. By the way, in G7, Macron, Draghi, President of the European Commission and other leaders, Biden himself, also they kind of talked about the counter project to the Digital Silk Road. They call it, build back better for the world. Right. So it's kind of an initiative so far. I think that we're waking up, and the Western countries are waking up in respect to counter the technological dominance of Chinese technological dominance. First of all, we have to also take into consideration the fact that China is stealing intellectual properties from healthcare organizations, from military defense contracting organizations. By the way, most of you heard about the Titan rain many years ago, and that they attacked the Sandia laboratory, national laboratory. They also they're stealing the technical blueprints from every kind of the fields. And especially during the COVID time, they attacked the pharmaceutical companies, healthcare organizations, just to steal the information. They also they have some of the leverages, because one is that they are offering everything at a low cost. They don't have conditions about the human rights and the democracy, kind of a level, and that sort of kind of things. Their mission is, they're very straightforward. They have their geopolitical mission, and they don't care about the corruption level in the country and so on and so on. They just want to form the cooperation and just to achieve their missions in this respect. So where it's heading, there will be a big, for example, in UK case, Huawei thought that they had the upper hand in this respect, but at some point, Western countries actually got together and discuss about this issue that we cannot allow Huawei's 5G technology to be a dominant force in the Western market, and it was stopped. Yes, but to remove all of this and reverse the course, it takes time. So it takes now in 2027 and 2028 we will be able finally to remove all the kids from the networks. So I think that now the Western countries and the United States, they're just waking up, and it's kind of a wake-up call for them that's no, because the technological dominance means that if you allow China this, then it means that you are not going to be a superpower anymore, and going to be a revisionist power, and they're going to be status quo power in the future. So I will see some trend in this respect, some positive trends. That's, I think that's it gives me some hope in this respect.
That's very helpful. Since we're so deep into our hour already, I was wondering if we could probably open this up for a Q&A session. I know lots of you have insights and questions as well for our panelists. Sir, in the back. I think we have a microwave here, a microphone.
It's a bit straight and it's
yeah.
space, and I think you'll be able to hear it.
And he's got a big voice, I listen to him.
Yeah.
So, I'm not big on China. I don't really know that market too well.
Yeah.
We spoke about how progressive China is. They're just a bulldozer that's going in there and crushing everything on the way. My question for you is, since you know that part of the world, the market that well, how heavy are the regulations are? Because I feel like that's their advantage over any Western world. They can literally sweep any regulation under the rug and just act like nothing happened. Now, don't get me wrong, every superpower does that here and there. But China is very well known for that.
Yeah.
And heavily regulated environments such as IT industry, especially when it comes to government contracts. Or even you mentioned something about construction and labor. There's probably no unions that are heavily regulated.
Exactly right.
And they're probably not that strong either. And when something happens, injuries and litigations and such, I think all of that goes under the rug. And I think that is the biggest advantage. And how do we tackle it? How do we go against that? It's just, there's no way to fight that. Yeah.
I think you just identified a fundamental problem that people are trying to wrap their minds around. I think the issue from a US perspective may not be so much Chinese power per se, but the fact, as you just put it, that power is being exercised in a variety of different ways and without constraints. Without moral constraints, regulatory constraints, political constraints. After all, who exercises a monopoly of power in China? It's not law. The law is referred to as a dagger that the party wields for its own purposes. So I don't necessarily begrudge a lot of these state-owned companies that are out building the digital Silk Road in other countries, but they do run roughshod over local sensibilities and local institutions, and creating situations that preserve sovereignty, that preserve the conditions that allow for a nation to grow, the conditions that allow for a region to cohere. This is certainly, I would say, certainly opposed to the geopolitical interests of some people in China. And it's also just something that the way in which some PRC businesses are doing business in the region that they're undermining. Yeah, well, it's an interesting question. I mean, there are partnerships and modes and ways of cooperating with external partners that CAMCA could pursue, I think, to alleviate some of the pressure that CAMCA countries may or may not be feeling as a result of this. But you know, at the end of the day, just as railroad gauge technology had played a huge role in demarcating the different geopolitical spheres of the last century, technology standards and technology platforms are really going to play an enormous role in demarcating the different geopolitical spheres of this century. And I do tend to think that paying attention to the startup and the innovation sector in CAMCA and ensuring that the technologies, for example, ICT or telecoms technologies, are being designed with a view toward ensuring that CAMCA countries are able to maintain sovereignty over their own data, and that this metadata isn't flowing seamlessly to the outside world, but that CAMCA countries are allowed to have you know, an even playing field to be able to harness this data and use it in ways that serve the people of the region. I think that that's how to deal with it, how to cope with this, rather than fight it head on. Yeah, but anyway, there's a lot here. Sir?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah, I wanted to ask a question to our esteemed panel. I mean, here in Washington, D.C., and you know, this kind of democracies, we invented the term digital democracy. We speak the language of digital democracy. We speak the language of mitigating the risk of digital authoritarianism. I'm just learning this language as well, as I'm new with the Center of International Private Enterprise. And I just wanted to ask them, obviously we are not much to China in terms of competing on the kind of, in terms of confronting Chinese technological dominance, as you nicely put it out. But what is the space for kind of creating a basic preconditions for the digital governance, for the kind of preventing the risks of cybersecurity, for kind of protecting the data, basically all sorts of regulations which needs to be in place, because technology is just technology, but it's up to the countries, up to the private sector to develop the standards which would protect them, which protect individual businesses who sell the stuff on the e-commerce from being stolen, or the finance being kind of, the data to be broken, or the money being kind of stolen. It's up to the government to develop standards for e-government. It's up to the financial sector to develop standards for fintech and cryptocurrency regulation. So it has nothing to do with technology. So I think that there is a bigger story which we miss, and we need to kind of think about. among the government, private sector representatives, financial sector representatives, how to develop those standards which would be kind of actually conducive to the best and the most kind of advanced types of technology who would be compatible to the standards, as opposed to this kind of cheap and possibly more kind of leaky and risky type of technologies. That's my question.
Yeah. Rakhim, you had used the word ecosystem earlier, which I think is exactly appropriate. As you had alluded to, the discussion here in Washington is some people focus on this notion of ecosystem. Others will refer to the expanding technosphere or sphere of technological influence that PRC is creating, that there's a free technosphere and then one that's essentially digital Leninism. I'm curious, Rakhim, I mean, what are your thoughts on this man's observations about how does one spur on the development of the important political institutions and legal institutions, and that, frankly, the politics that are required to be able to deal with this technology and to ensure that it's deployed in a way that serves the people of the region?
I think we should admit that we in the CAMCA regions, our countries in absolutely another level of the development of the public political institutions. And still one of the biggest challenge for our countries is to build sustainable, inclusive political systems. And we see the development in Kazakhstan, in Kyrgyzstan, in the political crisis, mostly in most part of the CAMCA countries. And talking about regulation, in case of Kazakhstan, it depends on more and more public opinion. So, and we see that some proactive minority could put regulation or kind of take over kind of the government initiatives even. And this is what we call politics. And the same situation in Kyrgyzstan, which is one of the, or Georgia, two democratic leaders and Mongolia, I suppose. So we are, I think, in the bottom of the list of less democratic country. Is it an answer? So the regulation, so the model, how to understand the appropriate model of the regulation of the access to the personal data. It's a big and extremely sophisticated agenda which is relevant for developed countries. And for our countries is also relevant, but I don't think that this is the biggest priority for the moment. The level of tolerance, how government or business using our private data, the personal data, is quite high, my assessment. So, and this is not the agenda for us, top priority.
I'm just going to add a little bit about the digital governance. I mean, this is very, and especially here in the United States after what's happened in 2016, 15 before the election, that kind of this field became prioritized because of the platforms, social media platforms, for example, were used to spread as information. The automated botted system, for example, there were tweets that tweet 2,000 tweets in a 24-hour period. This is impossible as human being to tweet 2,000 tweets in a 24-hour period. Also, trolls, automated botted systems, and spreading this information. But it doesn't. Of course, we have to. The government and organization in general, I think that's especially the social media company should take some steps in order to kind of prevent this. So I think there is a big psychological kind of a war between the major powers, and this is one of the kind of a weapon that's revisionist powers used to kind of advance their interests. And not only revisionist powers, some small little groups, for example, some political forces inside the country, and so on and so forth. So it doesn't mean that at some point, yes, of course, it should be regulated to a certain point, but we shouldn't kind of we should not restrict the freedom of speech of somebody because we don't like his or her, opinion about this, this or that certain topics. So, to keep the balance in this respect is very, very, very challenging. And I don't know how actually how the governments and corporations, gonna solve this issue. That's a very, very challenging issue. What is truth, I mean, it can be very, for me, for somebody, that particular news can be acceptable, but for you not, but doesn't mean that, somebody, some 20-something years old who is checking the content on the internet, should block my opinion because, she or he disagrees with me. So that's another one issue. You also mentioned crypto, for example. Yeah, I think that's going to change the whole world and whole geopolitics of the world completely. And I will be speaking about this geopolitics of cryptocurrency tomorrow. So I'm going to kind of talk a little different kind of issues and cases in this respect. I think that we're gonna see pretty soon. I think that old Bretton Woods system is kind of changing. We already don't see in our hands cash. I don't use cash. I use maybe twice in a month. I mostly use my credit card. But now what we see that we're gonna have absolutely pretty soon a different kind of a world, and that's going to also be regulated. Already there are some talks how to regulate the cryptocurrency, so nobody likes this kind of decentralized system. That's so yeah, there will be lots of talks and lots of kind of clashes in this respect. So we'll see. We'll see. We're gonna have an interesting world in the nearest future, definitely.
I also will add from my side, I mean, you mentioned the word digital democracy. So it means that there is a technology involved, and Rakhim also said that in the case of Kazakhstan, there is a public opinion. So in order to make the public opinion more vocal, I mean, the technology should be in use. So it means the technology should be more accessible and more available. And once again, if the Washington is really interested to have the digital democracy and also in this part of the region, they should make these technologies available for the users out of this region. As for the digital currencies or the cryptocurrencies, I believe still a long way to go in order to understand. I mean, we will end it up because there is no real understanding. I mean, what's the exact difference between of the digital currency or the cryptocurrency? For me, it's again the game of power. Once one guys, I mean, would like to go for the crypto power. I mean, not to be dependent of any government. The second guys, I mean, would like to go regular currency, putting with the central bank to the digital currency. So they will end up somewhere. And definitely we are not involved in these negotiations. But what we can do, once again, I mean, to use more technology, to be more vocal in general, I mean, also, and to use more technologies. And saying that to use more technologies, Khatuna previously said that we shouldn't involve Huawei with 5G technologies to be everywhere. I believe, I mean, we shouldn't involve any companies to decide on behalf of us what technology I can buy or not. This is a freedom. I mean, if I would like to buy the technology from China or from which is available, I will buy now, because you cannot stop me from the development. And this is the world of digital transformation, and it's happening on a daily basis. And as for the freedom of speech, I mean, if we are going to this world, again, if also, I mean, you shouldn't cut or ban anyone's account, even if it's account of Trump in this case.
Can I ask something about digital democracy? It could be irony, but at least in case of Kazakhstan, so the digital platform which provides democracy, freedom of speech, it's TikTok. TikTok, Chinese platform, and maybe Telegram.
Operation.
So originates from Russia.
Originates from Russia.
By the way, TikTok, you see that the algorithms is quite excellent, and you just can enter into TikTok, and if you have relevant content, you can get hundreds of thousands or even million views on TikTok. It's amazing. And not Meta, Instagram, or Facebook can compete with TikTok, and it's the most popular platform and the biggest, by the way, the biggest TikTok house now in the world in Almaty.
Nevertheless, our generation is more on Facebook and Instagram. We don't go for TikTok because we don't accept it yet.
And also, just American platforms which unite people, it's Tinder also. The most popular, yeah.
And on that note...
purposes might be different.
Well, thank you all for being here, and thank our panelists. We're just getting going on this. My hope would be that this is the beginning of a longer conversation that we can have in future forums. So thank you very much. Thanks, guys.